Good morning, everyone. If we could have silence, please, and let's stand for O Canada. Thank you for being so quiet and singing so loudly. We will need now to be silent as the ceremony begins. As you can see, this is a very special assembly. You're already using your good audience manners. Your hands are in your lap and you are listening quietly. Even though you will see and hear some wonderful speeches and work by our presenters, we will not clap today because of the seriousness of today's assembly. Since the year 1919, Canada's held Remembrance Day on November 11th for the 11th day of the 11th hour in the 11th month, when the fighting ended, bringing the First World War to an end. Ever since, we have paused on this date at around 11 a.m. to remember those brave men and women who went to war to protect our country and fight for our freedoms we enjoy today.
Stop here, Snoopy. We have to see this. Look, see these flowers? These are poppies. There's a legend that says where battles were fought, these white flowers all turned red, and in the center of each flower there was a cross. Look here. Remember what I said about poppies? This is the actual British field dressing station. There, Lieutenant Colonel J.M. McRae wrote the famous poem In Flanders Fields. In Flanders Fields the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place. And in the sky, the larks still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row. What have we learned, Charlie Brown?
We heard Charlie Brown and his friends talk about John McCrae's home in Flanders Fields. In the poem it stated, "The torch be yours, hold it high." He is asking us to remember the fighting of the brave soldiers involved in these battles. We show our responsibility and good citizenship by pausing to show that we appreciate the soldiers' efforts and will never forget the sacrifices that these brave men and women made for us. Even though some of us HK are not very old or big, we can still show our respect and set an example. Each one of us at HK take on an everyday job of making the world a happier and more peaceful place by spreading joy and kindness. We at H&K can do our part, for small hands can change the world. This week, many of us have been wearing poppies, as you see on myself. Did you know that there were hundreds of young farmers, carpenters, mechanics, bankers, and even some teenagers who left people to go off to war? Did you also know that more than 190 of these people never returned home to their families and died in the war? Some of these people were even buried in Flanders Fields, across the ocean where the poppies grow. The cross up front has poppies with the names of those soldiers on them. Today is a day we take time to remember them all and that have given service to our country. This is why we have Remembrance Day. To help us further understand, we'll have a short video followed by a poem from Mrs. Chapman called "Why I Wear a Poppy."
Hi everyone, I'm Major Jill and I'm a member of the Canadian Armed Forces, the military. I'm here today with my friends, the calf puppets. They're in the military too, and they're going to help me tell you what it means to wear our uniforms and how we're there to help people when they need it.
Hey kids, Pilot Dan here, reporting for duty. Sometimes when there are big snowstorms, forest fires, or when it rains too much and it causes floods, we help Canadians. We check on people to make sure they're okay. We deliver food when they can't get to the grocery stores. And sometimes, when the bad weather means they need to leave their houses, we help get them somewhere safe. Isn't that right, Anne?
That's right, Dan. And over the past 2 years, as people have been dealing with the COVID-19 virus, we've been there to help as well. But we don't just help Canadians. Sometimes, our friends in other countries need help too. So we go to their countries to work with them to help keep them safe. We learn a lot when we work together. And sometimes, when people are putting our friends in danger or hurting them, we have to fight in wars. Wars can be scary and dangerous, so people have to be very brave to sign up and to help.
When somebody wears a uniform, like we're wearing right now, it means that they've joined the military to help other people, even if they might get hurt. And when they were in the military, but aren't anymore, we call them veterans. Every year in November, we celebrate Veterans Week. It's a time to think about everything they did and share stories. Maybe you've seen people around you wearing poppies. The poppy is a symbol that we're thinking about our veterans and that we're thankful for everything they've done.
Our great-grandparents fought in a big war called the First World War more than 100 years ago. And 25 years ago, a lot closer to today, our parents helped keep Canadians safe after a huge storm, Ice Storm 98. We'd like to tell you some stories about the things they did, so you can learn about what it means to be a brave member of the Canadian Armed Forces and how special our veterans are.
And our friend Squeaker the carrier pigeon is going to help us too. So let's go back in time to 1917 and halfway across the world in France.
Who are you writing a letter to, Dan?
I'm writing a letter to my parents back home in Canada. I want to tell them about the battle I was just in and let them know that I'm a bit hurt, but I'll be okay. I want to make sure everything I say sounds good. Can I read it to you?
Of course. I want to learn more about the battle, too. Wait, what is a battle?
A battle is the part of a war when people fight. It can be a few days or even years. It's difficult and scary for people on both sides. Lots of people can get hurt or even die. This battle was at a place called Vimy Ridge. The German soldiers we were fighting had taken this place of land from our friends in France, and we helped take it back.
Oh, okay. That sounds like it's a really hard thing to go through. I'm happy you're all right. I'm sure your parents must be very worried. What did you write in your letter to them?
April 13th, 1917. Dear Mom and Dad, I'm writing to you from a hospital bed in France. I got hurt fighting in a big battle at a place called Vimy Ridge, but I'm safe and I'll be feeling better soon. Before the battle, we spent most of our time in these big ditches called trenches. Some of them were really long, so long you couldn't even see where they went. Even though the trenches were muddy and wet, they protected us from the fighting going on around us. We ate there. We slept there. We played cards to pass the time. It was difficult to be in the trenches, but we were all very nervous when we got the order to come and fight the German soldiers. They had their own trenches not too far from ours, and they were fighting very hard. We came out of the trenches in the early morning on April 9th, and we didn't stop fighting for 4 days. It was hard, scary work. Lots of people got badly hurt and a lot of people died. But by the end, we had won. We had taken back Vimy Ridge. They're saying this was a big moment in the war, a big moment for Canadians, since people from all across the country came to help out. But mostly, I just want to come home. I know everyone fighting feels the same way, even the people we're fighting against. I hope we all get to. Soon. With love, Dan.
Wow, Dan, that was really interesting. It sounds like it was really scary for you. Thank you for sharing your letter with me. If you put it in an envelope, I can send it. Squeaker, can you make sure this gets back to Dan's parents?
Across eastern Canada and into the United States. Today is January 5th, 1998. Yesterday, this heavy storm hit. Tens of thousands of Canadians have lost power, and some of them have had to leave their homes. Ontario, Quebec, and New Brunswick have called a state of emergency and asked for the military to help out. By the end of the week, more than 15,000 people in uniform will be called up to help out their neighbors.
Hey, Anne, all this shoveling has made me tired.
Me too, but I'm happy we're doing something to help all these people. It feels good to help keep families safe by making sure they have a warm place to sleep and food to eat. I know there are lots of other military members helping clear tree branches that have fallen down, cleaning roads, and even helping to turn the power back on.
For sure. And all of this while our own families are dealing with these problems too. It's hard to be away from them, but I'm happy to know that Canadians all across the country are helping out however they can.
Hi, I couldn't help but hear you talk about the great work you're doing helping people get through this storm. Can I take your photo for tomorrow's paper?
Yes, of course.
Okay, say cheese.
It's so great that we have these stories to learn from. Stories from 100 years ago, stories from 25 years ago, and even more recently. And the history of the CAF is still being written by people like us, who are serving now.
These stories are so important. They tell us a lot about who we are as Canadians and how our parents and grandparents helped keep us and our friends safe. And today, CAF members are still keeping people safe in Canada and all around the world.
Our job isn't easy. It can be scary and it can be dangerous.
So when you meet a Canadian Armed Forces member or a veteran, tell them thanks for everything they do to keep us safe during wars And when danger strikes here at home, too.
And try to learn about the stories of people in your own lives so you can share them with your friends too.
I'm so happy we get to share these stories with great kids like you. Thanks for listening to us today.
Why Wear a Poppy by Dawn Crawford. Please wear a poppy, the lady said, and held one forth, but I shook my head. But I stopped and watched as she offered them there, and the face was old and lined with care. But beneath the scars the years had made, there remained a smile that refused to fade. A boy came whistling down the street, bouncing along on carefree feet. His smile was full of joy and fun. "Lady," said he, "may I have one?" When she pinned it on, he turned to say, "Why do we wear a poppy today?" The lady smiled in her wistful way and answered, "This is Remembrance Day, and the poppy there is a symbol for the gallant men who died in war. And because they did, you and I are free. That's why we wear the poppy, you see. I had a boy about your size, with golden hair and big blue eyes. He loved to play and jump and shout. Free as a bird, he would race about. As the years went by, he learned and grew, and became a man, as you will too. But the war went on, and he had to stay, and all I could do was wait and pray. His letters told of the awful fight. I can still see it in my dreams at night, with the tanks and guns and cruel barbed wire, and the mines and bullets, the bombs and fire, till at last, the war was won, and that's why we wear a poppy, son. The small boy turned as if to go, then said, "Thanks, lady, I'm glad to know. That sure did sound like an awful fight. But your son, did he come back all right?" A tear rolled down each faded cheek. She shook her head, but didn't speak. I slunk away in a sort of shame, and if you were me, you'd have done the same. For our thanks in giving is often delayed, though our freedom was bought and thousands paid. And so, when we see a poppy born, let us reflect on the burden borne by those who gave their very all when asked to answer their country's call, that we at home in peace might live. Then wear a poppy, remember, and give.
Thank you, Mrs. Chapman. We are honored to have a very special guest here today. He is one of those people we heard about with the puppets, that's wearing a uniform and is serving our country to keep us safe and protected. It is my honor to introduce Chief Warrant Officer Chad Lamond, an active soldier with the 38th Artillery Tactical Group with the Canadian Armed Forces. We are so honored to welcome you here today and hear your message about Remembrance Day.
Thanks for that introduction. Thank you for inviting me to be part of your Remembrance Day and Veterans Week ceremonies. Following Charlie Brown and the calf puppets, it may be a tough act to follow. So, I am Chief Warrant Officer Chad Lalonde, and I am a Reserve Force artilleryman with the Canadian Armed Forces, 38 Canadian Brigade Groups, 38 Artillery Tactical Group, with units in Regina, Northern Saskatchewan, Brandon and Portsmouth, Prairie, Manitoba, and Kenora, Ontario. And I am the Regimental Sergeant Major. So I joined the Canadian Armed Forces, the reserves, in 1993. I signed up to go on a United Nations peacekeeping mission to the former Yugoslavia in 1995. Deployed with NATO's stabilization force to Bosnia in 2000. And I've taken part in a number of domestic operations, including flood fighting here in Manitoba. Unfortunately, I have to say that's 25 years ago. And I most recently deployed on Operation Inuk and to Rankin Inlet, Nunavut in the fall of 2017. My experience has taught me the value of military service and the importance of Veterans Week. Even though my grandpa landed on Juno Beach on VA, the importance of Veterans Week was something I didn't really understand or appreciate as much while I was young. Perhaps you, like I did, never really thought about why we have Remembrance Day or where it came from. Armistice Day, as it was originally called, began 103 years ago, the year following the signing of the armistice on 11 November 1918. The war, however, was not officially over until the signing of the Treaty of Versailles, 28 June 2019. From 1921 to 1930, Armistice stated that Armistice Day would be on the Monday of the week in which November 11th fell, which also coincided with Thanksgiving at that time, as it does in the United States. In 1931, the federal parliament adopted an act to amend Armistice Day Act, providing that the day should be observed on November 11th, and that day should be known as Remembrance Day. And Thanksgiving was subsequently moved to October. But why remember? The past couple of years, especially this year, has really driven home just how many young Canadians, some only a few years older than you here, sacrificed so much to protect our country and bring peace to war-torn areas. See how this goes. This is where the presentation gets interactive. So if I can have everyone please stand up. Thank you. So think of all of you here in this room representing the entire population of Canada in 1914. All 8 million people. You here in this room right now represent the fighting age population, roughly 15 to 30 years old. That was about 2.2 million men and women. So each of you represents about 5,000 Canadians in 1914. If I could have all of the ladies sit down, unless you're holding a coffee cup. All of the ladies, all of the girls, please. Okay, so ideally there would only be one lady, so there is, that's perfect. So you, ma'am, represent the 3,141 women who served in World War I, almost entirely as nursing sisters. In fact, there was one woman from Minnedosa and 2 from Binsgarth area that volunteered. Of those 3,141 women, 40 were killed, including Nurse Margaret Lowe from Binsgarth. Gentlemen, boys and men that are still standing, you represent the 1.14 million men aged 15 to 30 in all of Canada in 1914. So we're going to have the first 4 rows on either side. Sit down. That's good, thank you. So those of you that are still standing, you represent the approximately 650,000 men who served in World War I, 56.8% of the population. So we're going to have the next 2 rows on either side sit down. You represent the 172,000 men who were wounded, or about 15% of the entire population of Canada. If I can have all but the adult males and I guess 10 of you on the sitting in the chairs on the left side. So at least 14. So everyone else can sit down. You represent the 66,000 men who died in World War I. Now, if you think of just this community, Yukon surrounding area, these 14 people never came home. And another 21 have physical scars that will never heal. Some visible, some invisible. They fought to ensure that future generations, people like you and I here today, could grow up and live in a safe, democratic country where our rights and freedoms are protected. That is why we must always remember. We must never forget those 14 men in this area, the 5,000 that each of them represent, and the one woman who represents 5,000 women who served in World War I. Thank you. You see it. Next slide, please. So as we already heard, World War I started August 4th, 1914, when Britain declared war. And because Canada was still, even though it was an independent country and had been for about 47 years, it was still considered a colony. So as soon as Britain declared war, that automatically meant that Canada was at war. A week later, the first enlistment medicals were being conducted in many towns around Manitoba, like everywhere else in the country, small communities. 2 weeks later, 2 weeks after that, young men left by train to go to Valcartier, Quebec, where they would start their training. Later in the war, others would go to Camp Sewell, later to be renamed Camp Hughes, which is near Carver today. The centennial of the Battle of Vimy Ridge took place in April of 2017. I'll actually skip the Vimy Ridge stuff because we already talked about that today. So next slide, please. Canadian soldiers saw action in many tough battles, but few were as brutal as Passchendaele in the Flanders region of Belgium, which was a vital supply route for the German army. The horror of that battle and the valor of young Canadian soldiers engaged in that fight is hard to imagine. They advanced across a muddy landscape amid heavy German machine gun and artillery fire. They waded through mud up to the knees and in some places up to their waist. Slowly but surely, the Canadians were able to capture new ground, succeeding where other Allied forces had previously failed. In assaults known as Attack 8, the Canadian Corps alone formed the offensive, pushing the Germans back. On November 6, 1917, 105 years ago this week, the village of Passchendaele was liberated by Canadian soldiers. As impressive as victory as that was, it came as a terrible cost. More than 4,000 Canadians, most of them in their early teens and 20s, lost their lives in October and November of 1917, including men from this area: Private Herbert Atkinson, Sergeant Frederick Blakeway, Private Charles Maurice, Private Elgin McConnell, and almost 12,000 more were wounded or taken prisoner. The immense sacrifice of Canada's youth throughout the war, as well as our performance in a few key battles, accomplishing what other established nations could not, led to Canada becoming a separate signature on the peace treaty on November 11, 1918. Our country was no longer considered just a colony of England. Canada was now viewed by the world as an independent nation. Next slide, please. The Second World War also saw Canadians engage in fierce battles in the fight for world peace. This year is the 78th anniversary of D-Day and the Battle of Normandy. Let me introduce you to Cecil. Change slide, please. Cecil was from Arrow River, just up the road, close to Hamilton and Minnetonka. But 78 years ago, in the early morning hours of June 6th, at 26 years of age, he's old actually, he was crossing the English Channel into France in the massive amphibious attack that is famously remembered as D-Day. Imagine being Cecil, not knowing how or when the war would end. Could he have known the course of the Second World War would turn on this same day? The Allies had spent years carefully planning the surprise attack. A staggering 150,000 Allied troops were involved, 14,000 of them Canadians like Cecil. They knew that the Canadian, British, and American contingents each had a sector of France's Normandy coastline to take back from the Nazis that day. And they knew that many of them would not be coming home. Cecil was headed for Juno Beach, where the Canadians had to breach the German stronghold. Imagine knowing that on the other side of the water was a wall of German defenses, landmines, barbed wire, machine guns, artillery, and thousands of enemy soldiers. The challenge was clear. 2 years earlier, a largely Canadian force had tested the German defenses at Dieppe and suffered horrible losses, including one young man from this area, closer to Franklin actually, who was taken prisoner in the war and spent the remainder of the war as a POW. The challenge was clear. This time, Cecil and the other Canadians would show the same kind of courage, but this time they achieved an outstanding victory. Some began the assault drenched and seasick from the high waves that rocked the landing craft. Some waded onto the beach through neck-high water under heavy fire, desperately trying to hold their rifles over their head to keep them dry and working for the challenges that lay ahead. 359 Canadians made the ultimate sacrifice that day. While Cecil and his fellow soldiers were pushing the Germans back from the beach, other Canadians were attacking from the air. Slide, please. On D-Day, Cecil and the other Canadians succeeded in helping turn the tide of the war. That's 40 years after the war. It was the beginning of the end of the Germans, and the liberated countries of northwestern Europe still celebrate the Canadians who helped them reclaim their freedom. By the time the Second World War ended, over 1 million Canadians, and a total population of over 11 million, had served in the war. Over 45,000 Canadians gave their lives, and another 55,000 were wounded. So many Canadians helped bring peace. It was their sacrifice that allows us to live in peace today. We must never forget sailors, soldiers, and the aircrew who served and died in the cause of freedom. It is up to us to ensure the memory of their sacrifices endures. Nor can we forget the more than 125,000 Canadians that took part in nearly 50 United Nations peacekeeping missions, from Cyprus to Indonesia and Rwanda to Kosovo and Haiti. These are just to name a few. Few Canadians know that 113 the Armed Forces members died in the service of peace. Next slide, please. This is Sapper Christopher Jalapeno, originally from Russell, then later St. Claude, Manitoba. He started his military career in 13 Guide in Portage Prairie, where I first met him. This picture is taken from right after his first tour with the United Nations to Cyprus. Shortly after this picture, he transferred to the regular force as an engineer. He was one of tens of thousands of Canadians sent through NATO in the 1990s to stabilize the former Yugoslavia after it collapsed into ethnic warfare. Sapper Jalapeno, a sapper is a military term for a bomb disposal expert, was in Bosnia on his way to rescue 11 British soldiers trapped in a minefield. When the armored vehicle he was traveling in overturned, he was killed and 6 others seriously injured. The camp I was stationed at a few years later, during my tour to Bosnia, was named after him. Slide, please. Another important conflict Canada took part in began with the September 11, 2001 attacks on the United States. After those attacks, Canada joined the mission to eliminate the terrorist threat in Afghanistan and bring peace and stability to its citizens. It was the biggest deployment of Canadian troops since the Second World War. Slide, please. Captain Nicola Goddard, sitting in the center, an artillery officer from Shiloh, was one of the 40,000 Canadians who served in that mission. Sitting inside the vehicle, behind her, on the right as you're looking at it, is Jeff Fair, who also started in Portage La Prairie before transferring to the regular force, where I was fortunate enough to lead at Jeff. A slide, please. Captain Goddard always had a keen sense of duty, and she was devoted to the mission. Her role as a forward observation officer, she would spot targets from on top of that armored vehicle. You imagine the courage that takes. It's one of the most dangerous jobs in the Army. During an ambush on her convoy, Captain Goddard called for artillery support and, in doing so, put herself at great risk. Because of the support that she was able to provide, she saved a number of infantry soldiers in that attack. Unfortunately, during that ambush, she was killed. She is one of the 158 who paid the ultimate sacrifice and never returned home from Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, our troops, like Cat and Daughters, performed their duties with a level of bravery that earned Canada appreciation among our allies and respect on the world stage. In our acts of remembrance this year, many currently serving Canadian Armed Forces, members like myself, and many of the family and friends of our military personnel and veterans who served in Afghanistan will have that mission front of mind on Remembrance Day. Remembrance Day and Veterans Week are also about honoring the people currently serving in or recently retired from the Canadian Armed Forces. Next slide, please. We remember too the soldiers and veterans who were wounded in conflict, physically and mentally, after serving on dangerous missions. That includes veterans who have fought in the past, with a century or a decade ago, and the Canadian Armed Forces members who serve today. Slide, please. On any given day, thousands of service men and women are deployed on missions or exercises. We regularly participate in multinational operations to deter terrorism, defend human rights, and act as a force for peace and security in hotspots around the globe. As members of the Canadian Armed Forces, we also respond to all kinds of emergencies. This year has been relatively quiet for domestic operations within Canada. Canadian Armed Forces members this year were requested to assist after Hurricane Fiona in Newfoundland and Labrador, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island, similar to what they did after the ice storm in Quebec. Previous years have seen members fighting floods, forest fires, and viruses, even in the same year. For the last 50 years, the Canadian Armed Forces, specifically the artillery, has taken part in Operation Palachi, where they fire high explosive rounds into the Selkirk Mountains in BC, where they cause small avalanches before they become big avalanches, big uncontrolled avalanches. This keeps the railway and highway open to the roughly 4,000 vehicles a day and 40 trains each and every day. My son, as well as part of a small group of 15 soldiers, will deploy on this mission on Saturday. We do all this work to protect Canada and Canadians and to maintain international peace and stability. As members of the Canadian Armed Forces, we are often asked what people can do to thank us for our service. Next slide, please. A thank you is enough. It is an honor and a privilege to put on a uniform and serve our country, like those we remembering this week. Most importantly, all we ask is what we are here to do today. That you honor the memory of all those previous generations of brave teens and 20-somethings who made the ultimate sacrifice so that we have the luxury of living in this amazing country, strong and free. We can honor those memories by keeping our history alive, cherishing the courage and sacrifice of those who have served Canada so proudly and made the great country it is today. Next slide, please. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you, from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, lest we forget. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Officer Lalonde. I'm so proud of all of you today for sitting in part of Remembrance Day. And we've been working on Light a Candle by both singing and sign language. I now encourage you all to join in and show the world we will do our part to remember. Please sing and sign along. If we could all stand now, please. we could all quiet down now, please. Thank you. In a moment, you will hear the traditional last post. The tune is played in the Army to signal the end of the day. We will stand for the last post in a moment of silence so you can think about what Remembrance Day means to all of us. We will know the 2-minute silence is over when you hear the trumpet players start Reveille, the Army tune normally played at sunrise to wake up the troops again. Please rise and stand at attention for the last post and remain standing and silent until the end of Reveille. In this time of silence, let's not only think of the brave soldier, but also what we can do to make the world a peaceful, kind place. It is also a time to remember all the wonderful things that we can be thankful of because of our freedoms and the soldiers who have given us that. As we near the end of our service, a big thank you to all the staff, to Mrs. Weisgerber, Mrs. Chapman, Mrs. Major for bringing us all together to light a candle, both singing and in sign language. The biggest thank you to all is to you, the Cubs of HMK, both staff and students. You have shown that Remembrance Day is important. Tomorrow the 11th and all days going forward, this will be a moment for us at HMK to strive to live up to these HMK expectations. Even though we are not soldiers and we are young, we can help our school, community, and country in our way. As Terry Fox slogan said, I am not a quitter. Our soldiers never gave up in extremely desperate times. Because of this, we have the freedoms in our country. We ask that when things get hard, never give up, for you are not a quitter. Encourage others. Our soldiers past and present have to work together and have each other's back as we ask you to give a helping hand and be kind whenever you can. Helpful words to those that need it. Kindness is like a flower. Plant it in others and it will spread like the beautiful meadow, like Flanders fields. Let us be the planters of hope and kindness. Do your best. Our soldiers' best is expected every day they do their job. It's extremely tough and dangerous at times. Whatever you take on, please, always do your best. Whether it be at home, school, or in your community, give your best, always strive to give your best to others. All of you at HMK have exemplified these traits, and we thank you. We are small, but we are mighty. Let us not try to follow the example, but be the example. Before we conclude, a special thank you to our guest speaker, Chief Warrant Officer Chad Lalonde, and your service and dedication to our country. You've been truly a part in making our country true, north, strong, and free. Words are not enough to express thanks, but know this: the torch has been passed, and we will hold it high. Two small hands can change the world. HMK will remember. We'll now close today's ceremony by watching a video of examples of how HMK remembers, both past and present. Thank you for all being such good examples, both in school and at home. Take care and take time tomorrow to remember and be thankful for what we have. HMK will remember.
From the coast and from the prairie,
That ends our service. Take time tomorrow on our day off to remember. Thank you everyone for sitting so close and doing your part to remember. If we could exit out from the front back.